Hello everyone and welcome to the Franchise Show. This is the show and I'm going to do it where we get under the hat of all things franchising. And it's a live show. Well, it's live if it's July 1st at about 5:15 in the UK, 12:15 in bits of America, for about 45 or 50 minutes. And because it's live, you can pop in a comment. You can say hello. Because as I think I've mentioned before, you're the directors, you're the producers of this show, and you can direct which way it goes. And we love it when you say hello. We love it when you get involved in these conversations. This is about our community and you're very important to it. So please pop in a comment, say hello, get involved in our conversation. So what do? Each week on the Franchise Show, we take a new topic and we take a lovely guest or two, and there's no exception this week. We've got two wonderful guests. And before I introduce those guests to you, the topic we're going to be talking about today is preparing a franchise business for a private equity sale. Now, it's a fascinating subject, and I'm sure lots of people are going to be learning a lot here and also going to drive this conversation in some interesting directions. So without further ado, I'm going to introduce returning guest, the legend that is Alicia Miller. Alicia, welcome back to the Franchise Show.
Thanks for having me.
Oh, you're completely welcome. And supporter of the show, lovely, smiley Robert Zapata. Robert, welcome back to the show as well.
Thank you. Really, really appreciate the opportunity to speak to both of you.
Well, it's absolutely fantastic to have you with us. So a great way to start, because we have all sorts of people who are going to watch this in the future and new people that are going to be joining us, is a little introduction. So it's going to be ladies first, of course. Sorry about this, Robert. But Alicia, would it be okay just do a short introduction to yourself for our wonderful audience?
Sure. Alicia Miller. I'm a consultant who works with franchisors primarily and private equity firms. On the franchisor side, helping them get ready for sale and thinking carefully about their growth strategy if they have a private equity exit in mind. If you do the right things, you can delay having to take private equity money, and you certainly are in a better position to exit if you do all the right things up front. I also work with PE firms on their franchise strategy and their due diligence. In addition to my consulting firm, Emergent Growth Advisors, I also moonlight a bit with franchising, and the exposure for me to understand more deeply franchise performance data and also get more exposure to especially multi-unit franchisees. So happy to be here and looking forward to the conversation.
Wow, fantastic. What a wonderful introduction. Thank you very much for that, Alicia. So, Robert, it's your turn. Tell us all about yourself. I mean, lots of people know Robert, but give our audience a little introduction to yourself and how you become involved in our wonderful franchise world.
Yeah, I would love to. So I started my career off in small business lending, working with one of the largest micro lending organizations in the US. From there, just fell in love with everything small business, understanding the pain points, all that came with that. Then was fortunate enough to be able to get my MBA at UCLA, worked at Salesforce for a bit, with kind of really being able to kind of drive business value for enterprise clients and so forth. And then my heart really has always been being able to help small business owners and really kind of just best position them to kind of give them a fighting chance, if you will. And so I'm here at JustWorks. And for just a quick refresher, JustWorks is a leading tech platform that helps franchisors and franchisees simplify all the back office stuff. So think like payroll, compliance, HR, basically all the stuff that no one wants to do. We do that for them at scale so that they can really focus on growth.
Fantastic. Great introduction. Thank you so much, Robert. Well, we're going to get into our topic of private equity in a minute. But before we do that, we've got some people that have joined us live already. So we would love to welcome everybody here. Let's start with Lisa Feverick. Lisa's put hi, everyone. Well, hi to you, Lisa. Please let us know your thoughts on the topic today, but it's always wonderful to have you with us, returning member of our fantastic community here. We've got a LinkedIn user, a mystery LinkedIn user. Hello, good people. Well, hello to you too. It'd be wonderful to know who you are, but it's fantastic to have you with us. We have the lovely Johnny Joseph. Johnny is a franchise auditor. Don't be too scared. And he's based out of Los Angeles. And he's put where it's why we live here weather. I am assuming it's sunny in Los Angeles at the moment. Well, it's fantastic to have you with us, Johnny. It would be very interesting to get your take on this, actually, Johnny, because, how do you audit your business, and how, that's a big part perhaps of getting it ready for a private equity sale. And look, let's get into this, I think. So I'm going to start with Alicia, and it would be great to sort of, let's take this right back to the beginning, and we're going to start from the franchisor's perspective, I think. So as a franchisor, how do you get your business? What's a good early step to get your business ready for a sale of this type? I guess it depends on what stage you're at in your franchise business, doesn't it?
It does, and I would be remiss, Robert. I didn't realize that you'd gone to UCLA. I took some classes there when I was home from college. And I grew up in LA, so.
Oh, no way. I'm actually a double Bruin.
Oh my goodness.
Look at that. That's good. That's good stuff. I was thinking it was a lot of letters when you said you did an MBA at UCLA. I was thinking that's just a lot of letters there, isn't it?
Yeah, it just sounds fancy.
It is. It's very fancy. Anyway, sorry, Alicia.
No, it's okay. So getting yourself ready. So absolutely, first thing you need to do is ask yourself, why am I even considering an exit to anybody, much less a private equity firm? What are you trying to accomplish with this effort? Because that should ground you on everything you do sort of past that point. If you're looking for just money, that's one thing. If you're looking for money and help and you want to stay in the business for some period of time, then that will then suggest, okay, well, what help exactly do I need? What is it that I'm not able to accomplish myself or with my team? And that will allow you to have a lot more clarity on who you should be talking to and who you shouldn't be talking to, because not every private equity firm or private investor in franchising is created equal. They have varying track records, varying skills, varying personalities, and you've got to really think hard about what you're trying to do before you even go down this road. Now, let's say you've got a very clear perspective on what you're trying to accomplish, and you're looking to bring in outside capital and sell a portion of your equity. You need to keep your business in a sale-ready state, essentially, at all times. That means clean books, have your financials ready to go, get a little data room set up where you've got all your receipts and your franchise receipts, your operating manual, and so on and so forth. It sounds very basic, but a lot of people who start conversations with private equity firms, who start calling them, don't even have the data room ready to go. So you've got to get that stuff ready, because if you start a conversation, they'll say, great, let's look at your numbers. Okay, well, I didn't think to have that ready. Get it ready.
Absolutely.
Get stuff ready. But you've also got to think very carefully about how an outsider is going to perceive your business and what they're looking to accomplish potentially by investing. So most private equity firms investing in franchising want growth. So you've got to look like a growth engine that's just ready for a spark, right? You've got to have good scaffolding, good support for your franchisees, so that they can come in and invest heavily in growing the business and achieve their objective. If you don't have those systems really set up, then you're not really ready to accelerate, and they're going to say, you need more time. You need to, you're not right yet. So now, of course, there's always exceptions to every rule, right? A lot of private equity firms are starting to invest in smaller and smaller brands than typically they would have looked at 10 years ago or even 5 years ago, because they've picked over the space so successfully. But what they're looking at their core is still a business that's got good bones that they can get behind and try to accelerate. They don't want to clean up any messes. They're not looking for turnarounds generally. So that stuff's got to get cleaned up before you.
Love it. I love it. I mean, I write down, when you're talking, Alicia, I write down so many things. Pretty much everything that comes out of your mouth is a golden nugget for anybody in franchising.
I'm gonna save that clip and play it for my husband over and over and over.
I'm doing it too, so double that.
I always get through a few pens when you're talking. Look, fantastic stuff. We're going to bring in a few more people, welcome a few more people to the show, and then I think I'm going to bring things round to Robert, because I'm going to pick up on that sort of that data room, and doing a lot of the stuff that's the sort of stuff that I find boring. Right? So, keeping all of those things under control and making sure they're aligned. So we're going to come to you in a minute, Robert. But before we do that, I want to make sure that we've welcomed everybody that's here. We've got Neil Newman here. Great to have you with us, Neil. Well, look at that. Your QR code is on the screen. Who would have guessed that, hey? Neil is one of our lovely supporters, and he's from Gather. He's put, "Hi all, I am interested to hear about what controls and evidence is collected to validate the reputation of the business." Fantastic. We're going to come back to these comments once we've welcomed everybody here. We have the lovely Simon Wise with us. We're going to come back to Simon's question, but welcome to the show, Simon. And we have Tim Morris as well with us. Let's put this one up from Tim before we get to his question. He's put, "Hi Alicia, Robert and Harvey, good to be here. This is such an exciting subject." It certainly is. So before we get to these fantastic questions that are coming up, let's move on to Robert. Alicia made a really fantastic point. Some of the real basic stuff of getting your sort of your admin and some of your numbers in order, getting that ship in order, so that when somebody's coming in looking at investing in the business, they can look at something. What do you make of that in your experience?
So two things, I think. So it brings me back to my VC days. I remember that data room is basically table stakes, right? So if you are thinking about private equity, having a table room or a data room is going to be necessary for that evaluation period, and just being very organized in that sense. And I think shameless plug for you, Alicia, and is your book, I imagine. I know that you perhaps probably have a checklist, if I remember correctly, in terms of being able to set that stuff up. But just thinking about overall kind of what a data room really signifies, right? And so what a data room is, as far as having all the numbers and all that stuff, right? And so that a private equity firm can really kind of take analysis. What you want to be able to show is that you have not just an organized data room, but also the data room really signifies the numbers that you want to represent. And I think that kind of really speaks to kind of the point of really being able to make sure that, I think one of the largest pain points that I see and that I've heard is that, franchise systems, no matter if they're emerging or more mature, they tend to try to grow faster than really what they're ready for. And that's kind of where they kind of really fall into issues and kind of all that stuff. And so when I'm thinking about kind of private equity, and again, I mean, it's really great to be able to speak with the specialists or have the specialists on the call with us, but thinking about really what kind of those numbers you really want to signify, right? And that would be positive, basically unit economics. And then if you can capture also franchisee satisfaction there, and using kind of franchise business review or other services that can kind of really kind of help you kind of capture kind of just putting in the numbers, the certain feeling that your franchisees have for the business, I think that's a great first step. But I think kind of wrapping that up when you're thinking about just an overall kind of package that you want to be able to present to a private equity firm is really being able to make sure that all those numbers really kind of reflect that your operations are very much keyed in. And that's going to really enable you to make sure, again, that franchisee satisfaction and then that ultimate unit economics is up to par. Any thoughts there, Alicia? I know you're the expert here, but I just want to make sure that perhaps
Robert,
I didn't embarrass myself.
No, fantastic stuff. What I'm going to do actually though, Robert, is we're getting some fantastic questions. And as I've always said, that this show is very much about our community. It's a conversation between us all. So I want to make sure that we touch on as many of these questions as possible. So we've got a good one here from Neil, and Neil has put, I'm interested to hear what controls and evidence is collected to validate the reputation of the business. Let's have a think about this one. I mean, when you are looking to sell a business, no matter who you're looking to sell it to, they're wanting this information. How is that normally sort of packaged together, Alicia, for private equity? I mean, I assume it's quite a lengthy presentation style document, but what type of evidence and do you call upon for these documents?
Sure. I mean, you're making a sale package essentially to tell your story. Why is your business attractive? Why is it resilient? Why do franchisees want to be part of this story? How well do franchisees do in this business? What are the growth opportunities? All of those things, you're crafting a unique story about why you're special and attractive, and your numbers need to prove it out. One thing to keep in mind is when you start a process, it's going to take a while to sell the business, no matter how good the business is. So you're going to be essentially living underneath whatever pro forma forecast you're putting in your marketing package. This is not a place to brag and not be able to deliver on that, because 6 months could go by, 9 months could go by, or longer in a sale process. And if you forecast something and can't live up to it, someone asked the validation question. Verify the truth of what you're saying. There's two major areas they're going to look. First is, at some point, they're going to hire accountants to do a quality of earnings analysis. I do cover this in the book, and if you want the more lengthy sort of what's in a QOE process, drop me a note or an email and I can send it to you. But it's covered in the book. Basically, what they're looking to do is confirm cash flow in the business and understand what the major levers of cash flow in the business are and how sustainable that cash flow is. So for example, is this business driven by upfront fees, or have they built a really strong, sustainable revenue model? Is it based on royalties? Is it based on product sales, et cetera? So they're trying to pick that apart, and they will validate that during a QOE process. And as Robert mentioned, they're going to validate franchisees. So they're going to read your surveys. Definitely getting something like an FBR survey done ahead of time is helpful. But they will also talk to franchisees. And they may hire someone like me to mystery shop them or to interview them. And this is, again, not a place where you want to have a lot of problems brewing amongst your franchisee base. They understand that there's a bell curve and not every franchisee is going to perform at the same level. But if they hear a consistent theme of dissatisfaction with their outcomes as franchisees, you're going to have a lot harder business to sell.
Happy, successful franchisees, I think, is the expression that I spout out quite a lot on this show, but it's ringing true in this conversation as well, because, you know, franchise businesses are that, they're franchise businesses. You know, I'll often say to somebody, whatever sector it is, are you a franchise business that offers that service, or you are a service business that's franchising? Those things are very different, and they make a difference to how you set the tone of your business and how attractive it might be moving on. We've got so many fantastic questions coming in, so let's get to a few of these. We had a good one from Tim.
Tim wants to know the detailed data room. The list is in the book. It might even also be on my website. I haven't looked at my website in a while. emergentgrowthadvisors.com could be up there, or just send me a note and I can send it to you. But look, you want everything. You want your franchise agreements. You want every receipt that's been signed. You want all your financials. They want to see every single franchise unit from organized. If you don't have that, that's already a problem. Looking at the performance of your system periodically to understand the differences between cohorts, and, you know, somebody who came in 10 years ago or 5 years ago, somebody in this region versus that region, all your legal agreements, your leases, your employment agreements, your taxes, everything needs to be in that data room. And you can parse it, right? You can restrict so that people can see only a certain amount, you know, for the first conversation. And then maybe, you know, once you get a signed letter of intent, then maybe you open it up to give them more access after that. But for sure, they're going to want to see your most recent financial performance and your cohort analysis of franchisees pretty early.
I love it. I mean, I've always said that this is a subject that is so valuable. I think especially here in the UK, I think in the US, the private equity sale is perhaps more commonplace. So I think it's really valuable to have this discussion. And, you know, for me, I had no idea what a data room was, you know, because, you know, it's really useful to have these conversations, get everybody understanding what these things are, what the language, you know, what language does a private equity buyer speak? When you're packaging together the story that you rightly spoke about, Alicia, you've got to find the language that is right for that buyer, haven't you? And, you know, make sure that the tone is correct as well.
Correct. It also signals to the buyer how sophisticated you are. So it's not just, you've got to know your own business, of course, but you've also got to understand their business a little bit. Otherwise, you look a bit like a babe in the woods, and they say to themselves, we're going to file that away for the negotiating portion of this conversation, right? So get help. Get a strong accountant who has M&A experience. Get a lawyer who's got M&A experience. Use a banker. Don't use a banker. That's up to you. But you need to bring subject matter experts to this conversation to help you represent yourself, so that you are also, once you start talking about terms, there are a lot of ways this can get very tricky, and you want to fully understand what kind of relationship you're getting into, especially if you're selling equity, if you're rolling equity forward.
Yeah, I mean, asking for expert advice. I mean, it always reminds me of that book, Think and Grow Rich. I'm sure a lot of people have read that book, but there was, I think it was the 3 feet from gold thing in that. It just reminds me of that, you know, and it's always a very powerful lesson. Let's have a look. We've got so many questions coming in. Let's have a look at one from Simon here. He's put, what components add the X factor to attractiveness to PE investors? Data, tech, AI, supplier contracts, franchise contract, life cycle, market position. I mean, Alicia, you've spoken of a lot of the sort of the fundamentals there that franchisors need to think of when they're growing and preparing their business for this sale. But are there some really different or interesting things that have occurred that are maybe some franchisors that have done that others haven't have made that sale a little bit more attractive to a private equity buyer? Or is it just getting that foundation right and just having that solid business packaged ready to sell?
You have to have the foundation right. It certainly helps to have it well packaged. But Simon's right. There are also sort of X factor things that make you that much more attractive. That list is also in the book, but they are basically strong management team, really resilient customer demand, and it's even better if customers have some sort of passion for your brand, if you're able to create that. Now, that easier said than done for a plumbing franchise, for example. But there are ways to deliver superior customer service so that customers are saying all the right things about your brand online, and it looks like an exciting brand that they want to get behind. They love recurring revenue membership models for sure. They want to see, though, that there's also white space that you can still grow into. So when you're thinking about sort of when is the perfect time to bring in an investor, you don't want to wait till you've sold out your markets because there's no growth story there, right? So that's a different buyer. That's a buy and sort of long hold buyer, versus someone who's going to lean into price perhaps more because they're looking to grow the thing. So you've got to think really carefully about how you're different and special, and it can't be hype. It's got to be real and proven in your numbers. Prove it with your average ticket price. Prove it with how resilient your customer base is and how many are staying or how many are coming back. Prove it with your management team expertise and lack of turnover on the management team. Prove it with your franchisee validation, and also that they're coming back to buy more licenses. All of those things are proof points that they're looking for, whatever your story is.
I love it. I love it. Again, I'm busy writing that down. What do you make of this, Robert?
No, if I can jump in. So I think one thing that I want to point out, and I know you make a big emphasis, just kind of reading what you've written about before, Alicia, is really kind of the importance, right, of setting yourself up with the correct operations, especially as as an emerging franchise and then as a more mature franchise. So maybe if you can add some sort of, there's nuances there, right? Especially, it's still early in the game for an emerging franchisor in terms of even thinking about kind of getting into that private equity game. And then when you think about your mature kind of franchisor, then, they're kind of a little bit more ready and but they still have their nuances. So maybe can you touch on that and kind of how you've seen your experience, kind of the importance of like setting up operations and kind of, I think what you've said before in the past, not getting ahead of your skis, I think is the right way that you've said it. And so I would just love to kind of, I think that would be good for the audience, just kind of be able, wherever they are in their journeys respectively.
Sure. Well, so think of it this way. There's a right match for everybody, and buyers organize themselves along what I call the private equity profit ladder. A buyer who's interested in an emerging brand is a very different buyer than someone who's looking for a more mature brand. Some buyers are adept at taking a great brand with scale and taking it international, for example, and others that wouldn't be really in their skill set. So part of this is, what does the brand need to take it to the next level? A more mature brand, might need some rethink on marketing, might need a rethink on their delivery model. There's a lot of great 2.0 concepts that are coming in that are running circles around mature brands. So at every, there's these life cycle inflection points in a brand, and thinking also about, your franchisee base and who they are and who they need to be going forward. There might be some changes that need to be made there too. So all of this sort of organizes itself, I think, very neatly. The market has a great way of sort of sorting this out. And the right buyers, if you've got to tell the right story to attract the buyer that the business needs to get it to the next level. Don't try to be something you're not. And if you've got issues that need to be worked on, And you can say, well, look, we're looking for a partner to help us blow out international markets. That's the next step for this brand. Say that. And you will bring in naturally different buyer interest.
That's a really interesting point. It's going to bring me on to something that Tim mentioned. But before we get on to that, if you have just joined us today, this is the Franchise Show. And today we are talking all about private equity and preparing your business for a sale to private equity. It's already been a fascinating conversation. Our incredible community, our incredible audience taking it down paths we never knew it would go down. What I will say as well is I'd like to mention the fact that Alicia has a wonderful book, which I have a copy. What we're going to do is we're going to put a link to that. I did attempt to multitask and put the link in while I was doing this. But what I'm probably going to do is put a link to that book so that everybody who's watching this can have a look at that in great detail as well. I'd like to, before we move on, I'd like to welcome Penny to the show. Penny is, of course, one of our lovely supporters and a fellow author, of course, Alicia. And in fact, your QR code and your book is on the screen. I haven't got your book today, Penny. I'm so sorry. human nature there, but there you go. Penny's put, hello, Harvey, Alicia, and Robert. Great to be joining Franchise Friends again from a blazing hot office. Yes, it's very hot here in the UK today. Let's have a little look. This is the one that I wanted to bring up, actually, after what Alicia said. Tim's put, are private equity companies looking to invest cross-country borders? This, you just mentioned there about international, so I thought I'd bring this one up. So do you get, for instance, US-based private equity investors looking to invest, I don't know, in a little country like United Kingdom? Let's use that as an example.
I would say sometimes. That's less common. That is a specific skill set. And, if they've got experience bringing brands into other markets, that's a great skill set to have and is unique. I think the United States is large enough that there's plenty of opportunity to grow brands in the US. That means that many of the private equity investors currently in franchising in the US don't need the international element and still can have a great outcome with their investment here in the US, just because it's such a big market. But if what you really need is to take your brand to other markets, then that will influence the kind of buyer that you're going to want to partner with.
Yes, absolutely. Let's bring up, look at that. I'm going to bring that one up for you, Alicia. Simon's put, it's a great book. I read it on holiday last week. You see, everyone reads your book on holiday. I think you need to get it into the airport bookshelves. That's where I think you need to get that. Let's get into this a little bit more, because we've got a few questions coming up. Let's have a little look at Simon's question here, because I think we should touch on the positives and the negatives, the challenges, and when it's easy going. So let's have a look at this one. We have seen good franchise businesses being destroyed by private equity, the exception, not the rule. But why is this? Bad fit from the start. There's a few questions that have come up now, and I think it's worth having a look at this, because to get it right, we've got to face the challenges and I think dispel some of the myths about this, some of the fears about this. Okay, so when and why does it go wrong, I suppose, is a question. I suppose it's the opposite of all the good stuff you've said, but give us some rules.
Yeah, so let's unpack this. First of all, change is hard. So even if changes are made by the next buyer, whoever the buyer is, and so what happens change can be very unnerving. And one of the mistakes that sometimes private equity owners make is they don't work hard enough to consult franchisees or communicate why they're doing things, or talk to franchisees and get their feedback on really anything. That can create some bad feelings that just have to be managed. In the data would suggest that most private equity firms are positive for the brands that they buy, because they are investing in a growth story. And so the changes that they're making, the investments that they're making are in order to support growth, which by definition, you can't grow without franchisees. And so those investments in things like marketing, for example, tend to be positive for franchisees. But when they fail, I mean, there's a lot of really great reasons why the private equity firm would want to do everything right, in order to make this successful. When they screw up, it really falls into two categories. First is there's a turnaround situation here, and it was more complex than they realized. Don't underestimate hubris and people being overconfident in their ability to turn around a franchise brand. It's really hard to turn around a franchise that's going sideways because you have to get franchisees on board. And that independence can come back to drag change, makes it much more difficult for change to happen. So either there was a failure of due diligence and they didn't realize it was as much of a turnaround as they thought, or they did know it was a turnaround, but it was harder than they anticipated. But either way, there's a failure to win franchisees' support when they can't figure out how to get that turnaround accomplished, or there's too much debt on the business and they've reduced their oxygen and ability to pivot to a new place. The other place they can mess up is unforced errors. This is things like putting too much debt on the business, having a short-term mindset, being too short-term focused, not protecting unit profitability. If you start making changes that line your pockets and to the detriment of franchisees, you're probably gonna have trouble, right? Overly aggressive tactics, not communicating again with franchisees. Again, it comes back to, are you building trust with your franchisees such that they want to continue in the business or not? And it doesn't matter who the owner is. It could be a strategic that buys you. It could be another franchise business that buys you, or private equity. Those are all a recipe for trouble.
I'm going to bring it to Robert in a minute, because a lot of what we're talking about is the fact that you're buying a nuanced business that's full of people, whether those people are the staff, whether those people are the franchisees. You're buying something that involves a lot of nuances with people. And I'm going to bring you, Robert, in with your experience in sort of HR and payroll, and simplifying that process. Right? Can that be done with a franchise business to try and simplify those people elements of a business and make it less nuanced and more packaged and appealing to somebody who's buying into a business?
Yeah, and I think that's the beauty of both franchising, but also probably the thorn of franchising as well. As you have so many people who are buying into these systems that are really kind of chasing their dreams, but at the same time, some of them are more savvy at running a business than others. And so that could prove difficult, right? And so again, no one ever buys into a franchise system because they want to have the best 401k plan or whatever that may be. And so kind of when you're thinking about at a high level in terms of just being able to create a system that really accepts, I wouldn't say accepts people for who they are, but kind of meets them wherever they are and kind of their business journey, right? And so I think, shameless plug here, but I just love JustWorks in the sense that our mission is very much dedicated to helping small business owners and all that good stuff. And so just being able to kind of create really a simple and intuitive platform that really kind of meets people where they are, makes it really simple, but then also being able to kind of tie in our human support, which is very empathetic as well. I think that makes all the difference. And really just kind of, again, when you're thinking about unit economics and you're thinking about really building a system, really having something that can really kind of capture and make all the hard stuff of running a business really easy. So then that allows a franchisee to really, again, focus on doing what they want to do and really chasing their dreams. And I mean, if you want to kind of tie this into maybe more the private equity and more the ROI aspect, it's more about, they can focus more on revenue generating activities than more of the kind of stuff that can kind of handicap them, especially.
Yeah, absolutely. I think you've nailed the fact that if you can sort of get your people, your HR, and these things in order, just like all of the other foundations of a business, that can be really good for any kind of sale. One thing I want to touch on, because these conversations are fantastic, but we always run out of time. That's why we can always have these conversations again. But we've got about 5 minutes left of this part of the show. And we've started to talk about this, but I want to bring this round to how it might affect the franchisees. We have touched on this because, Alicia, you said about the fact that change is hard. The pace of change with private equity is hard. Simon's put here, how do you keep franchisees on board following private equity investment? It's not what they bought into at the start. This is a really interesting one, isn't it? Because they might have bought into that whole founder's story, and how does that stay sort of fresh within a business, after that sale? How does that affect things?
Well, so if franchisees have bought into the founder, and look, change happens, and if you're too married to this specific group of people is the only reason I'm in this franchise, then you're setting yourself up for a disappointment because people move on, right? Mm-hmm. So the way this works, as someone else pointed out in the comments, is strong leadership. You need to have a truly symbiotic relationship with your franchisees where everybody is succeeding together. And if you're not doing that, then you're going to run into trouble. So if post-acquisition, you start making changes the franchisees don't understand the logic for, or seem to be just purely profit-taking, you're probably going to run into trouble. If you're making changes, for example, to try to grow the system, then explaining that and bringing them into the decision process will likely make those changes much more likely to stick and be successful. Mm-hmm. So this just comes down to your philosophy as a sponsor of a franchise system, of what kind of sponsor you're going to be. Mm-hmm. Someone else asked, do franchisees get involved prior to the sale? Yes and no. Generally, they try to keep that quiet. They're certainly interviewing franchisees. And, if you're in a franchise system and given how things are going, the odds are, if it's a good system, eventually it's going to be private equity backed. So if that is not a fit for you, then you've got to have your own business in a sale ready position and be ready to move on if you don't like kind of where the direction is going. But franchisees should not wait until a transaction's on the table to suddenly try to have a voice. You've got to build muscle memory of managing through change before ownership changes happen, because now this is sort of the culture of the business, and this is how this business has been successful. Mm-hmm. If you can make that relationship core to the success of the business, then a sponsor coming in will be less likely to mess with that, because it's part of what's made you successful to this point. But you've got to establish that muscle memory and those habits and that organization well in advance in order to have an influence later.
Oh, I mean, absolutely. It comes back to a why again. We started this conversation with the fact that a franchisee might have been too bought into a founder story, too bought into that team of people. But that isn't what they should be buying into, and that isn't how you should set the business up as a franchisor, particularly if you are looking to try and sell to private equity or sell in any kind of way. It's the same with when you sell any kind of business. If it's too tied to an individual, then it's a very hard thing to sell, because you can't sell that individual with the business. And franchising should be in a position where people are buying into they're buying into a system, they're buying into a brand, that's what they're buying. And that's then what private equity is buying. I mean, these conversations are amazing. We've had so many fantastic comments today. I'd like to say a huge thank you to everyone who's putting comments in. I just want to quickly recognize and say hello to my wonderful friend Joe Caruso, fantastic figure in franchising. And this was the comment that you had touched on, Alicia, when you were talking there about, there's good and bad leadership, and that's how this sale can go through smoothly if you've got great leaders, great people in your businesses. Fantastic to have you here, Joe. We could carry on. I could carry on having this conversation for about 2 hours, but I know that Alicia has got to go, so we are going to start to wrap things up. Neil says, sorry, I have to dive out. Hugely interesting. Thank you. I will hear the rest tomorrow. It's always good to have you with us. And we are now going to get to the last part of our show. And this is a fun bit. And this is a bit where my camera will go black for a little bit because it's now technically illegal to see me without a hat. And you'll be glad to know that I have a hat on again. Now look at this beauty. Okay, and this part of the show is brought to you by PJ Murphy and Son Bespoke British Hatters. And it's my good friend, Paul. My hat's off to you, Paul. And this is the part of the show where we're going to stop talking about private equity for a little bit. And we're going to find out a little bit about our guests. This is also the part of the show where they get to grill me with a question. Terrifying. I'm normally one that does that. And because Robert has been through this, we are going to ask the lovely Alicia a question or two. So we always like to have a bit of fun here. So you can kind of choose between any of these sorts of things. Do you have a claim to fame? Have you met somebody famous? Or do you have an interesting and unusual hobby? You can pick one of those, whichever one you like. And then you get to ask me one.
Who's going first?
Ladies first.
Okay. Well, I love photography. That's my hobby. I've become obsessed recently, though, with Pilates. And so I'm in Pilates almost every day.
Oh, wow.
I don't know, something just the flip switched. And I said, I've got to be doing more here. And every day I go to that class, I think, I'm finally making progress. And then they twist you into some new pretzel form. And I'm like, oh my God, I've got so far to go. It's embarrassing. Seriously. And it's part of a franchise system, actually. And I know the local franchisee. And, I wish more people knew that local franchise business is owned by often somebody in their town. I wish franchising did a little bit of a better job of communicating that, because it means something to me. I watch her business and I watch how well she's doing and how she's building this team. And so I'm getting a good workout, but it also kind of just warms my heart to see what a great little business she's running.
I love it. And just before we go on to Robert, I think you're absolutely right. As a community, as an industry, we need to be shouting about it as much as we can, and especially for younger people as well. I know that there's a few people in the UK that go to schools, and to the young people in the schools, they name drop brands that they all know and love, but didn't know they were franchise businesses. And it's a very, very important message to deliver. So before you get to ask me a question, let's go to Robert. Robert, tell us something. I don't think you told us about the Peace Corps, and I'm pretty sure that that's a big part of your early life. So perhaps you could touch on that.
Oh yeah. So best and hardest experience of my life. So I lived in Peru with a very, very poor fishing family for 2 years, basically, and kind of really had to adapt to their whole lifestyle. And I think that was probably one of the best experiences in my life, and I think really kind of set my career in terms of just thinking about empowering people with like microfinance and just really kind of helping the little guy. So yeah, Peace Corps, it's really hard to say, I guess, but one thing that I could say that really inspired me as a whole is when you go into Peace Corps, you think, I don't know if it's just the American way of thinking, or I know this is a global show, but just that kind of thinking that you can really change everything didn't happen in the first year or so, and then not even the first year and a half, and it really kind of had to change from changing the world to really changing the worlds of those around me. And I always try to kind of live by that, and I do that now moving forward.
Fantastic. Thank you so much. Well, look, we are very nearly at the end, and I know Alicia's got to go, but I better not try and get away with this. So we'll only do one question. I think, Robert, you got to ask me one last time. So, Alicia, if you wish, and you can let me get away with this one if you wish, but you can ask me anything you like now.
Well, I know you're very well traveled. Where haven't you been yet that's on your bucket list that you still want to get to?
It's a great question. Japan, Kyoto in Japan is where I would like to go. I'm an amateur gardener along with my wife. And when I've seen the beautiful gardens of Japan, there's something about the lifestyle that really appeals to me, and I'd love to witness it. So I think Kyoto in Japan is my answer to that one. Great question. Thank you.
It's a beautiful place. You need to get there as soon as possible.
I certainly will. Right, so we have now come to the end of today's wonderful episode, and I would like to do some thank yous. First of all, I'd like to thank our wonderful community. You are what drives this show. You're what makes this special. I thank you every time, and I really appreciate each and every one of you for being here. So thank you to all of you. I'd like to thank our wonderful guests, the fantastic Robert Zapata and the wonderful Alicia Miller, for your time today. Now, next week on the Franchise Show, we are talking to Leslie Flowers, who teaches the book Think and Grow Rich that we spoke about. And we are going to be talking about achieving a franchise goal. That's going to be our subject next week. So please join us for that next Tuesday, 5:15 GMT, 12:15 EST. Until next time, my friends, take very good